I'm Skaji. I'm a practicing witch, professional tarot nerd, and from time to time a storyteller. It's spooky season again, and this is another story in a little series that I'm using to celebrate the season. All of these stories are true, even if they never really happened. My freshman year in college, I had to be on campus a few weeks before classes began. You see, I had managed to make it into the marching band. I'd left a little farm out in the country, and now I was in a big city. Well, I guess to a lot of folks it wouldn't be a big city at all, but it was the biggest city I'd ever been in all by myself. Now, Mother and Daddy helped me move into campus. Of course, moving day was exciting. I'd spent the summer collecting all the things one might need for college life and saving up money from my little part-time job. Now, band camp, it wasn't anything like it was in high school. It was hot, yeah, but it was a lot more difficult, and we were treated like adults, and I loved it. We spent long hours on the practice field and then more hours in rehearsal halls. After a couple of weeks of rehearsal, the day finally came to be issued our uniforms. I suppose they waited to do that to see who was going to stick it out, and there were some folks that didn't, so I suppose that makes sense. But I stuck it out because I was a band nerd to the core. At that time, the music building was in one of the older buildings on campus, and I'd heard stories that building was haunted. They said that sometimes you could hear the sound of somebody playing music, even if you were the only one there. The practice rooms were down in the basement there, and I'd head that way in the evenings to practice. It was easier to get a room later at night if you weren't a music major. And to be honest, I was kind of hoping that I'd hear some of that rumored spectral music. Well, finally that day came for me to be issued my uniform, and the uniform room was basically a giant closet right there in the basement at the end of the hall lined with those practice rooms. Uniform day was exciting and chaotic, with band members coming and going, milling about, being issued things, jackets, pants, shakos. That's what we called our hats, and trying things on and trading things out. And you could tell the difference between the veteran band members and us newbies. We were all excited and more than a little bit confused, but the old hands were straightforward and businesslike. They didn't tend to stick around any longer than needed. Now, at the end of that giant closet, there was this glass display case, and inside it was a uniform, just like the one that I was being issued. I asked the person giving me my uniform what the deal was with that uniform there in the big case, and they told me that was Robert's uniform. It seems a few years before, Robert, a member of the marching band, had experienced some tragedy, and he'd passed away. And after that, the band had retired his uniform and displayed it there in that case. I asked, but no one could tell me what had happened to old Robert, and maybe they didn't know, or maybe it just wasn't something that was spoken about openly. But what they would tell me was that sometimes, late at night, the music folks might hear was Robert playing his trumpet. Now, some folks might have been put off a little bit when they found out that the practice rooms, they might be haunted, but me being me, I was encouraged to go to the practice rooms more often in hopes of encountering Robert. And I guess it was a good thing because I got me some extra practice in. I sure needed it at the time. When I was there late practicing, I'd stop every now and then and I'd listen. Maybe I'd hear Robert and his trumpet. And then one night late, I was there practicing, and I stopped to take a listen. And that night, I could ever so slightly hear the sound of a trumpet playing, but maybe it was just somebody else there practicing. I wanted to be sure. So I stepped out of the room, and the sound was a little bit louder now, but it didn't seem to be coming from any one place. Now, each of those practice rooms, you got to understand, was just a little room with a chair and a music stand, and each one had one of those little slit windows in the door like you see in so many other institutional type doors. Well, I headed down that hall, my saxophone still in hand, looking for the sound of that music, and I peeked through the window of each little practice room as I passed, and I could clearly see that each was dark and unoccupied. And the pretty sound of that trumpet, it just kept on, coming from nowhere and everywhere. Finally, I came to the end of that hall and to the door to that big giant closet where the uniforms were. And now that door didn't have one of those little windows in it, and I figured it'd be locked, but I tried it anyway. And when my hand touched that door handle, the door just gently swung open. Maybe somebody hadn't closed it up properly. And when that door opened, the music became more distinct. It was smooth jazz. It was languid. It was deep. I leaned in. I was looking around. It was dark in there, and I reached in to turn on the light. But when I flipped that switch, nothing happened. Maybe I flipped the wrong switch, and I turned on the lights to someplace else. Well, I reached into my pocket and I pulled out the little flashlight that I kept on my key ring, and I shone that light around, and all I saw was racks of uniforms and the glass case there at the end and Robert's uniform. And still that trumpet played. The uniform was displayed just like it would have been worn, right, hanging there in that case. But now it looked like somebody was wearing it. And as I looked at that uniform, my little light casting a weak glow around the room, the music began to swell and grow louder, and a dim light began to glow around that uniform, around Robert's uniform. As I was looking on at all this, the music abruptly stopped, and in the silence that followed, a new sound began. It was a rhythmic tapping sound, like somebody tapping their foot in time. I realized I still had my horn in my hands, and I started to tap my own foot in time with Robert. And not long passed before the sound of that trumpet started again. Jazz. I didn't recognize the tune, but I started to play. Now, I've never been what I'd call a great musician, but that night, on that night, as I played jazz with Robert, I don't think I've ever played that well, before then or since. I could feel that music all the way to my bones, and it just kind of pulled me along with it. Now, Robert and I, we played like that for a while, and our tune, I guess it just sort of reached its natural conclusion, and we stopped playing. I can't be sure, but in the silence after that song, as the final sounds faded into echoes through the hallways, I thought I could see that hat there in that display case give me a little nod. And I raised my horn in salute to Robert. And it's about then that all the lights in that room, they came on, and I tell you, that kind of caught me off guard. But I figured that Robert was done playing for the evening, and so I told him good night, turned off the lights, and headed to collect my things and head on to the house. And it felt nice to know that I wasn't the only big old band nerd there that night. Since then, the university built a new music building, and I was still in school when it was completed, and I remember the first time uniforms were issued there. The uniform room was an even bigger closet than before, and in that room I didn't see Robert's uniform. I asked around, but no one seemed to know where it was now. I suppose sometimes that's progress. sometimes the past just falls through the cracks. And for the rest of my marching band career, I never heard any rumors about Phantom Jazz in the new music building. But one night, years later, I happened to be attending a performance there in the old music building. Now it was the theater and dance building, and I wandered down the stairs to where those practice rooms were. And at the end of that hall, there was a door now labeled costumes. I reached out a hand and found that door was securely locked. But right then, I thought I could hear ever so slightly the sound of a trumpet playing jazz, languid and deep. I want to thank you for spending some of your time with me today, and I hope you've enjoyed this little story. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm Skaji. Safe journeys.